is called Off to the Enchanted Wood. I hope you're sitting comfortably. Then I'll begin. The children ate their breakfast quickly. Mother told them to make sandwiches for themselves and to take a small chocolate cake from the cupboard. You can take some donuts too, she said, and there are apples in that dish over there. When you come home, I'll bake some potatoes in the oven and you can eat them with butter and cheese. Mother, we will be hungry, said Joe at once. Let's hurry up with the sandwiches. We want to start off as soon as possible. Make sure you're home by 6 o'clock or I will worry, said Mother. And look after your cousin. Yes, I promise we will, said Joe. At last everything was ready. Joe packed the food into a leather bag and slung it over his shoulder. Then the four of them set off for the enchanted wood. It didn't take long to get there. A narrow ditch was between the lane and the wood. You've got to jump over the ditch, Rick, said Joe. And they all jumped over it. Rick stood when he was in the wood and looked around at everything. What a strange noise. The leaves of the trees are making this very strange noise, he said. It's as if they're talking to one another, telling secrets. Whoosh, 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 whispered the trees. They are telling secrets, said Beth. And do you know, Rick, if the trees have any message for us, we can hear it by pressing our left ear up against the trunks of the trees. And they really can hear what they say. Whoosh, 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 said the trees. Come on, said Joe impatiently. Let's go to the faraway tree. They all went on, and soon they came to the mysterious tree. Rick stared at it in astonishment. Wow, it's simply enormous, he said. I've never been in such a big tree in my life. And you can't possibly see the top. Goodness me, it goes on and on. What kind of tree is it? It's got oak leaves, and yet it doesn't really seem like an oak. It's a funny tree, said Beth. It may grow acorns and oak leaves for a little way, and then suddenly you notice it's growing plums. Then another day it might grow apples or pears. You just never know. But it's all very exciting. And just look at it. Wow. How do you climb it? Said Rick. In an ordinary way. We will one day get all the way to the top. We might even today, said Joe, because we want to show you our friends who live inside the tree on the way. But sometimes there's a rope that's let down from the tree, and you can get help with that and get up the tree a little bit faster, and then we can go easily onto the top. Or sometimes Moonface lets down a cushion on the end of a rope and then pulls us up one by one. He swung himself up into the tree and the others followed. After a bit, Rick gave a shout. Wow! It's extraordinary! This tree is growing nuts now. Look! Sure enough, it was. Rick picked some and cracked them. They were hazelnuts, ripe and sweet, and everyone had some and enjoyed them. Now, when they all got very high up indeed, Rick was most surprised to see a little window in the trunk of the faraway tree. Goodness, does somebody live there? He asked the others. Look, there's a window. I'm going to peep in. You better not, shouted Joe. The angry pixie lives there and he hates people peeping in. But Rick felt so curious that he just had to peep in. The angry pixie was at home. He was filling his kettle with water, and he looked up and saw Rick's surprised face at the window. Nothing made the pixie more angry than to see people looking at him. He rushed to the window and at once flung it open. "Peeping again," he shouted. "It's too bad. All day and night people come peeping. Take that!" He emptied the kettle of cold water all over poor Rick. Then he slammed his window and drew the curtains across. Joe, Beth and Frannie couldn't help laughing. "I told you not to peep in at the angry pixie," Joe said, wiping Rick with his hanky. "He's nearly always in a bad temper. Oh, and by the way, Rick, I must warn you about something else. There's an old woman who lives high up in the tree, who's always doing her washing. She empties the water down the tree, and it comes slish-sloshing down. You'll have to have a look out for that, or you'll get wet." Rick looked up at the tree as if he expected the water to come tumbling down at that minute. "Come on," said Beth. "We'll come to where the owl lives soon. He's a friend of Silky's and sometimes brings us notes from her." The owl was fast asleep. He usually only woke up when it was night time. Rick peered in at his window and saw the big owl asleep on a bed. He couldn't help laughing. "I'm enjoying this," he said to Frannie. "It's quite an adventure." The children climbed higher and came to a broad branch. "There's a sweet little yellow door with a knocker and a bell," said Rick. Staring at the door, it was set neatly in the trunk, a little bit back. "Who lives there?" "Our friend Silky," said Joe. "Ring the bell and she'll open the door." Rick rang the little bell and heard it go ding-a-ling inside, and footsteps pattered to the door. It opened and a pretty little fairy looked out. Her hair flung around her face like a golden mist. "Hello, Silky," cried Joe. "We've come to see you, and we've brought our cousin Rick, who's come to live with us. He's having a lovely time exploring the Faraway Tree." "How do you do, Rick?" said Silky, holding out her small, tiny little hand. Rick shook hands shyly. He thought Silky was the loveliest creature he'd ever seen. "I'll come with you if you're going to visit Moonface," said Silky. "I want to borrow some honey from him. I'll take some pop cakes with me, and we'll have them with Moonface in his house." "Whatever are pop cakes?" said Rick in surprise. "Wait and see," said Joe with a grin. They all went up the tree again. Soon they heard a funny noise. "That's old Mr. What's-his-name snoring," said Joe. "Look, there he is." Sure enough, there he was, sitting comfortably in his chair, his hands folded over his tummy and his mouth wide open. "How I'd love to pop something into his open mouth," said Rick at once. "Yes, that's what everybody feels," said Joe. "Moonface and Silky once put some acorns in, didn't you, Silky? And what's-his-name was very angry. He threw Moonface up through the hole in the cloud and put him into a strange land in there." "Where's the old saucepan man?" asked Beth. "He's usually with his friend, Mr. What's-his-name." "I expect he's gone to see Moonface," said Joe. "Come on, we'll go there." As they went up the tree, Silky suddenly stopped. "Listen," she said, and they all listened. They heard a curious slishy, sloshy, slishy, sloshy, slishy, sloshy coming nearer and nearer. "It's Dame Washalot, Dirty Walter coming," yelled Joe. "Get under a branch, everyone." Rick wasn't as quick as everyone else. They all hid under the boughs, but poor old Rick wasn't under when the water came pouring down the tree, and it tumbled onto his head and went down his neck and made him very angry. The others were sorry, but they also thought it was very funny. "Next time I climb this tree, remind me to wear a swimsuit," said Rick, trying to wipe himself dry. "Really, I think somebody ought to stop Dame Washalot pouring her water like that. How disgusting." "Oh, you'll get used to it and dodge the water easily," said Joe. On they went, up the tree again, and at last they came to the top. There they saw the door in the trunk of the tree, and from behind the door came the sound of voices. "That's Moonface, an old saucepan man," said Joe as he banged on the door. It flew open and Moonface looked out. His big round face beamed with smiles when he saw who the visitors were. "Hello, hello, hello," he said. "Come on in. The Saucepan Man is here." Everyone went into Moonface's curious round room. There was a large hole in the middle of it, which was the beginning of the slippery slip. The wonderful slide that went round and round down the inside of the tree, right to the bottom. Moonface's furniture was arranged round the inside of the tree trunk, and it was curved to fit inside the tree. His bed was curved, the chairs were curved, the sofa was curved, and the stove. It was really very odd. Rick stared at it all with great surprise. He really felt as if he was in a dream. There must be very, very strange to find somebody that can make a sofa that looks as peculiar as this one. It was old Saucepan Man. He really was a very curious sight to look at. He was covered with saucepans and kettles and wore a saucepan for a hat. You could hardly see him except for his face and hands and feet, because he was so covered with saucepans and things that he made a tremendous clatter whenever he moved. "Who's that?" he said, looking at Rick. "This is Rick," said Joe, and Rick went forward to shake hands. The Saucepan Man was very deaf, though he did sometimes hear quite well, but nearly always he heard it wrong, and sometimes it was very funny. "Click, Chick," he said. "Well, that's a funny name for a boy." "Not Chick, Rick," shouted Moonface. "Stick," said Saucepan Man, shaking hands. "Good morning, Stick. I hope you're very well." Rick giggled. Moonface got ready to shout again, but Silky quickly handed him her bag of pop cakes. "Don't get angry with them," she said. "Look, let's all have some pop cakes. They're freshly made today. And oh, Moonface, do tell us what land is at the top of the Faraway Tree today." "It's the land of Topsy-Turvy," said Moonface, "but I don't advise you go there. It's very uncomfortable." "Oh, yes, let's," said Rick. "Can't we peep in at it?" "We'll see," said Joe, giving him a pop cake. "Eat this, Rick. Pop cakes are lovely." Rick put one in his mouth and bit into it. It went at once and found his mouth full of sweet honey from the middle of the cake. "Delicious," he said. "I'll have another. Oh, Joe, please, let's take our lunch up onto the land of Topsy-Turvy. Please, please, please." And that's the end of chapter 2. And I'll read chapter 3 tomorrow, and it's called The Land of Topsy-Turvy. So we'll wait and see what happens then. Hope you've enjoyed today. Perhaps if you've got time, you could draw me a picture of your favourite part of that chapter. Maybe the Saucepan Man, or maybe the slippery slip slide. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.